how Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has sat down for an exclusive interview with The Sun and told them he believes Putin has tried to have him assassinated at least 5 times. In an interview with the paper's defence editor, Jerome Starky, Zelensky spoke of an operation which he believes aimed to have him killed.
I think not less 5, 6, not less. Interesting, the last information that there is the plan, which I shared with you out of the camps that that's at the beginning of our meeting that they want very much, and the name of operation is Maidan 3. It means to change the president. Maybe it's not by killing. I mean, it's changing. They will use any instruments they have.
Well, listen, this is great. Jerome Starky, defence editor of The Sun newspaper, who was responsible for that incredible interview, joins us now live down the line from Krakow. Jerome, thank you for making it talk today. Really appreciate it. I just want to start slightly differently. I was driving into work today and saying to a friend, he said to me, Jez, we're talking about the Middle East. It's almost as if the world has stopped talking about the Ukraine situation. Came into this amazing front page, Putin has tried to kill me 5 times. He doesn't sound surprised or concerned. Comes across as the coolest man on the planet.
He certainly seemed to shrug off what might for other people be an incredible strain, living under that sort of constant threat, knowing that, you know, a force as malign and powerful and potentially conniving as Russia is trying to kill him. You know, we know that in the first days of the Russian invasion last year, there were reports of Russian special forces. Some said they parachuted into Kyiv, teams trying to kill him, rifles being handed out. His office, one of the aides described it as a madhouse. We feel a long way away from those really chaotic and uncertain days. But as we get further from the day of the Russian invasion last year, you're right. You know, Ukraine has slipped out of the news, and that's a combination of a couple of things. But it's partly because progress in the battlefield has become less dramatic. We've got used to the, you know, however horrific it remains, we've got used to this sort of awful drumbeat of, you know, daily missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities, of the clashes along this, 600 miles of front line. That's started to almost become normal. And then, of course, with what happened last month in October, with horrific attacks in Israel and Israel's enormous response in Gaza, that has diverted the world's attention. And Zelensky, like the friend who called you this morning, Jeremy, acutely aware that the world's attention has been diverted away from Ukraine. And he said, you know, he was very candid about it. He said that doesn't help us. There are concerns more widely in Ukraine as to whether or not its allies, its Western allies, have got this sort of mental bandwidth to cope with 2 major global crises at the same time. And those allies have been trying to reassure Ukraine that indeed they can. Because, you know, on the one level, here is a man whose job, Zelensky, whose job has been to galvanize international support. And in many ways, he's done a phenomenal job of that around the world, becoming the face of Ukraine in addressing Congress, addressing Parliament, addressing chambers all around the planet. And at the same time, that same person living under that enormous threat. For us to reach Zelensky in his office in Kyiv, we had to go through a number, I won't go into too much detail, but enormous security, even to the point that we had to surrender pens and pencils before we met him. So it gives you an indication of how seriously they take his security and how serious those threats from Russia are, even though he did seem capable of sort of shrugging them off. He said they were no worse than a bout of COVID. The first one, pretty scary, but after that, not so bad.
And Jerome, we saw a brand new Foreign Secretary last week. God knows how many we've had.
Lord Cameron of Chipping Norton.
Thank you very much for the past couple of years. Any robust promises there made between Cameron and Zelensky for actual physical support for Ukraine in terms of military operations, etc.?
That's a really good question, because actually we've had a number of visits by British ministers. We saw David Cameron in his first few days as Foreign Secretary. We saw Grant Shapps going both as Defence Secretary and he'd been in his previous cabinet role as well, covering energy. None of them have made any sort of significant announcements in terms of materiel or in terms of military kit, weapons, or in terms of money. The message that they've delivered, the message particularly that David Cameron delivered, was that Britain is with Ukraine for the long term. Now, the timing of that was really important, of course, because that was David Cameron's first trip as Foreign Secretary. He took that visit while the conflict in Gaza was raging. So, that was a symbolic show, and the message was, Britain is with Ukraine for as long as it takes to defeat Russia. Now, that's in the context of a growing realization, both inside and outside of Ukraine, that this is going to be a long war. There were understandably hopes last year when we saw the phenomenal resistance and then the speed with which Russia was forced to retreat on various fronts. But we saw from Kyiv in the first few weeks, indeed, so March and April last year, first few weeks of the war. Then we saw Russian forces collapse and retreat in Kharkiv in the northeast last autumn. About this time last year, we saw a Russian retreat from Kherson in the south. It allowed people to believe that these Russian retrogrades, as you might call them, these Russian retreats might be systemic, and we might see Russia falling out of Ukrainian territory. That hasn't happened. The previous 12 months have been a different story. It's been a story of Russian forces dug into well-prepared defenses. It's been a story of the difficulty for either army in this conflict to go onto the offensive. And indeed, of course, we've heard Ukraine's top general describe the situation along the front lines as a stalemate. He said he compared it to World War I, when both sides in that conflict had sort of largely even military technology. Now we've heard it, General Zelensky, the top commander, has said that in Ukraine, neither side can really move without the other one seeing them. They can't move and they can't mass. If they do, they can be destroyed.
Jerome, I have to say, I really appreciate. Just one very quick question. Being how much time, really appreciate you joining us from Krakow. I saw there on the screen. Did he say anything about Russia and the current situation in the Middle East? There's been rumours that Russia is sympathetic towards Hamas. Just a quick response to that, my friend.
He did. He said that Russia really wanted. He said Russia really wanted, or it was a big wish of Russia's to see what is happening in the Middle East unfold. And he pointed out, he highlighted Russia's relationship with Hamas's backers, principally Iran. We know that Iran has been supplying Russia with kamikaze drones. We also understand Iran a supporter and financer of Hamas. So Zelensky was drawing these parallels and warning that Russia actually wants to light fires around the world. Putin deliberately fomenting unrest. He mentioned the Middle East. He also said that they are trying to stir up trouble in the Balkans. And he warned that the combination of all of these things and with what's happening in Ukraine could spiral into World War III. Those were his words.
Wow. Well, Jerome Starky, thank you so much for joining us this morning, and congratulations on a very, very great
article in the Sun. Bout today, Jerome meeting Zelensky. Seriously, go and read it. Jerome, thanks, pal. Speak to you soon.